Hi everybody, welcome back to Cottoverdi. My name's Annette and today I want to sow some seeds, but I'm also going to give you an update on previous seeds that I've sown this year and show you how they're doing, whether they've germinated, how long it took them to germinate. So if you're interested in a catch-up video, this is it. But I'm also sowing some hardy perennials today and I'm super excited about this because I really want these plants in my garden. This is a really cheap, inexpensive way to do it, and what I'll do is I'll talk you through which seeds I'm sowing, and then I will show you how I'm sowing the seeds. And then if you want to skip to the bit where I'm doing an update about previous seeds that I've sown, I'll put a little link up here, not a link, I'll put a timestamp up here. So what I'll do is I'll put the names and the pictures up on the screen for you to have a look at what I'm sowing as I go through their attributes. The first seed I'm sowing today is called Germination trifoliata. It's also known as Bowman's root. Bowman's root creates this wonderful mound of greenery, and then springing up from the greenery are these sort of browny orangey stems with floaty white flowers on the end of them. It kind of reminds me of Gaura a little bit, but they're sort of starry butterfly-like flowers that float on the end of these stems, and it sort of creates this haze of white above the foliage, and it's super pretty and floaty and elegant. It's really suited to shade planting, so it likes semi-shade. You can plant it in full sun, but I think it does really well in semi-shade. This is quite long flowering. It's going to flower from May probably through to September, and when the flowers are over, the calyxes or the sepals that have gone over are kind of reddish browny coloured, so that sort of adds interest. And another attribute of this plant, which is fantastic, is that it's got like this fiery colour during the autumn. As the leaves are fading, they just look spectacular. So the seed packet says you can sow them at any time, but it does say that it's a really good idea to sow them in the autumn and leave them in your cold frame and let the cold stratification of the natural winter cycle take place. That's actually what I'm going to do because it's only January and we're bound to get some more cold weather. I'm going to sow mine now, and then I'm going to leave them in my cold frame, and hopefully spring will produce shoots. So of course, if you don't want to do that, then it's perfectly easy to replicate cold stratification by faking it. And the way you do that is you sow your seeds and then leave them for 2 weeks in somewhere, an area that's warm, so indoors, and then put them in the fridge for about 4 weeks and then bring them out again after 4 weeks. It takes a little while, but that's perfectly possible to do. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put mine in the cold frame. I'm going to do it the lazy way. The next seed I'm sowing is called Anthericum ramosum, or also known as St. Bernard's lily. And this has fairly similar flowers to Bowman's root, but this plant likes full sun. So it's also clump forming. It's got these narrow leaves, and then it's got these spires, not really spires, it's got long stems, long slender stems with starry shaped white flowers breaking out along them and at the top. And so it again sort of creates this haze of white above the foliage and looks really pretty. It's a little bit like Bowman's root, it's a little bit like Gaura, you know, these starry shaped white flowers. I think they're so pretty and elegant. So as I mentioned, St. Bernard's lily prefers full sun. It likes fertile soil and it prefers it to be moist. It's going to flower well, flower the best if it's in moist soil, but it is very drought tolerant once it's established. But it also doesn't like being waterlogged in the winter. Most plants don't. I also read that St. Bernard's lily can be found in nature, growing in the wild in the Alps, which I thought was fun. It is native to Western and Central Europe. These plants grow to about 80 centimetres tall, if you include the flowers, about 30 centimetres wide, and they will flower from May through to July. And I think there's like the best flush in July, that's what I've read. So again, the seed packet is very similar to the Bowman's root in that you can sow the seed anytime indoors, or you can sow them and put them in the cold frame, which is what I'm going to do. Or again, we could do the cold stratification method. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave mine in the cold frame and let nature take its course. So the next plant I'm sowing is going to be fun to see whether I can get it to germinate or not. It's called Allium cernuum. I think that's how you say it. It's also called lady's leek or nodding onion. And the reason for this is because it forms these clumps of onion-like foliage, and then coming up on slender stems are these beautiful nodding sort of bell-shaped clumps of flowers with like little well, it looks like an allium, but the flowers are kind of really loosely dangling, and it's a lavendery, purpley pink colour, sometimes with little white flowers as well. I think on the RHS website it says that we mustn't eat the bulbs, but on the Ballyroberts Gardens website it says that the whole plant is edible. I am not telling you to eat any part of this plant at all. That is not what I'm saying. So please do your research before you decide to eat it. I'm growing it solely for its ornamental properties and value to my garden. That's why I'm growing these. Now, the other thing that I've read about these is that they're super easy to germinate, but I've also read that they can take from like 8 days to like forever. So it's very erratic. So I don't know how quickly I'm going to get germination. I think it's going to be really fun to see how quickly I can. Again, this is another plant that needs cold stratification, or to sow them and leave them in your cold frame. You can sow these directly, but I don't sow anything directly because I have cats and foxes and badgers and other things that dig up my garden. So I'm sowing mine in the same way as the previous two. I'm going to sow them in compost and then leave them outside in the cold frame. I've also read that we might need to double cold stratify. So, you know, it could take 2 freeze cycles before these seeds decide to germinate. Let's see, it's going to be a fun experiment. So this allium prefers full sun. It will grow in part shade. It's going to grow to about 60 centimeters tall, so about 2 foot, but only 5 to 10 centimeters wide. So, you know, just, I guess, like a typical allium bulb. And then the last lot of seeds I'm sowing today is called Erigeron Kovinskianus. I love saying that name. Erigeron Kovinskianus. It's also known as Mexican fleabane. There are loads of Erigerons, but this particular one has got these gorgeous, tiny little daisy-like white flowers that turn pink or purple over time, and it is so floriferous. It just flowers like crazy for a really long period. Here in my garden in South Buckinghamshire, where we're equivalent to about a zone 8A, it is fully hardy and will remain green throughout the winter in most cases. I've got some growing in my garden and I could divide it, but I want a lot more, and I have plans for what I want to do with Erigeron. I just think it's such a pretty and useful plant, so I am going to have quite a lot of it in my garden. It looks fantastic in pots because it kind of spreads, and so it'll like dangle over the edges. It's also a really good plant to have in pathways or on the edge of borders because it kind of softens the edges. So it's super useful. It likes full sun, but it will tolerate part shade, and it's quite low growing. So I think it's going to grow to a maximum of like 30 centimeters tall, but it will grow to, you know, between 50 centimeters and I have read up to 1 meter wide. I've never known it grow that big, but it will grow quite large. And I think it's hardy down to an H5, so that's sort of down to -10, -20. So it's hardy to pretty much every area in the UK. Anyway, this one is super easy to sow. I probably shouldn't sow it till February, but you know, it's the end of January, so I'm sowing it now. And I'm going to sow it indoors and provide it with gentle heat. And hopefully, as soon as the weather warms up a little bit, I'll just be able to put little seedlings outside because they are quite hardy. I think they'll do all right as long as I get them big enough. So I'm just going to get on and sow the seeds now, and then I'll show you all the seeds that have germinated from the sowings that I've done previously this year. So I use multi-purpose peat-free compost. So the Bowman's root has quite large seeds, and I'm going to sow 2 to a cell because I've got enough seeds to do that. With the St. Bernard's lily, it says to sow 1/2 centimetre deep. I've just made a little dib, and I'll probably put a couple in each hole. And then I'm just going to cover each little hole up gently with my fingers. With the allium, it says to sow 2 centimeters deep. So I'll make a deeper hole, and I'm going to put 2 in each hole because I've got enough seeds to do that. The Erigeron Cottoverdi seed is like dust, so I'm just going to sprinkle it on. It says to surface sow. Hopefully I'll get loads. And then I'm going to cover all the cells with a sprinkling of vermiculite. I like to do this because it helps retain moisture and it also helps prevent algae growth. Just going to put a very light sprinkling on the Erigeron just in case it doesn't want to be covered. It didn't say it needs light to germinate. So out of these seeds, the only one that I'm sowing indoors is the Erigeron Cottoverdi, and I'm going to put that on a heat mat with a domed lid on top of it. And these 3 are going to go outside. So what I do when I've sown my seeds is I put them in a tray of water to bottom water them, and then when the vermiculite changes colour, I know that the moisture has reached the surface, and I'll put these 3 outside. So now it's time to update you on the seed starting process. This heat mat here, anything on this heat mat, the heat mat's off. I'm just using it to protect the table. This heat mat is on. So I'm going to show you what's germinated and tell you how long everything took to germinate. So this is my steeper or lace veil grass, and I have got 4 seedlings that have germinated out of 8. I don't know why the other 4 didn't germinate, but I've got 4. So I had 1 germinate after 7 days, I had 2 at 11 days, and then I had 1 more germinate a day later. This one here is bent over because Cosmo, my kitten, decided he wanted to try and eat it. This one's just leaning over because I've watered this morning, but they're fine. And then I've got 3 trays where I have had Lisianthus germinate, or Eustoma. So this one is Voyage to First Love. So I've oversown my seeds because they're pelleted seeds, and pelleted seeds don't normally last more than a year, and these were over a year old. So I thought, well, I'll throw them all in and see if anything germinates. And I've had absolutely fantastic germination. These are the tiniest little seedlings and they take ages to grow taller. So I also had pretty good germination on my Roseanne Clear Green. So again, I oversowed in this one. There's nothing germinated in this cell, but all the others have got a couple of tiny little green things in them. And then this is Corelli Light Pink, and I have had only 1 seed germinate. So again, I would have sprinkled loads of the pelleted seed in here, but I've got 1 tiny, tiny, tiny seed germinated. Oh, is that one there? Oh, I lie. There's another one here. So I've got 1 in here and 1 in there. I've got 2. So they're just taking a bit longer maybe. I don't know. I've taken them off the heat, so we'll see what else germinates. So the Lisianthus and the steeper were sown on the 10th of January, and it is now the 30th of January. So that's 20 days later, that's the results I've had there. And then I've got 1 more tray where seed has germinated, and I didn't notice that it germinated, so they're a little bit leggy because they were on the heat mat too long. Can you see that they're a little bit leggy? So this is Penstemon Twizzle Coral, and I've got seeds that have germinated in 4 of the cells out of the 8. But because they're stretching like this, I've had to take them off the heat mat because they're trying to get away from the heat. That's why they're stretching. So I've taken the whole tray off the heat mat and just left it there. So the majority of these here are Penstemons, and then there's 1 more Lisianthus here where I've had no germination at all, and that is the Arena Champagne. So it's a bit disappointing because I really wanted Arena Champagne, but nothing's germinated so far. It may just take a little longer, and then none of these Penstemons have germinated yet, and they were all sown on the 23rd of January. So exactly the same time that this one, but these are just taking longer to germinate. So I don't have any of my seed trays under lights at the moment. I grew all of my seeds without lights for many years, but I do have a seed starting station with shelves and lights, and I will set that up this weekend because I am going to need it. Now we're getting into February, it really is seed starting time for things that are going to need lights. But at the moment these are just by these really large windows here, which is providing plenty of light. I just don't want them to lean towards the light, which is what might happen if we don't have overhead lights. I just used to turn the trays around basically when I didn't have any lights. So it's definitely possible to sow seeds without any fancy equipment or anything like that. You don't even necessarily need heat mats because most seeds like around 18 to 20 degrees, which is what most of our homes are. So, you know, grow them in the kitchen and they'll be fine. Anyway, let me take you outside and show you what's growing in the cold frames. So the other area where I've had progress is when I took the root cuttings for the poppies, and I did an experiment where I laid some of them down flat and some of them I pointed into the compost, and the ones where I pointed them into the compost, like these, have started to sprout. So I think I probably put 5 or 6 in here, and I've got 4 sprouting already. So that's super exciting. The ones where I laid them flat, none of those have started to sprout yet, and I haven't dug around to see whether there are any roots. This is something that I did, I'll put the date up. I can't remember when the video is of when I took the poppy root cuttings. I hope you've had fun with me sowing seeds today and seeing what's germinated from the seeds I've sown so far this year. I've still got the Eryngium white glitter in the fridge. It's going to be in there for probably till the weekend, and then I'll take it out and put it on a heat mat. It's been cold stratifying basically, so it's been in 4 degrees, 3 or 4 degrees, and then I'll bring it out into the warmth and hopefully I'll get some germination. Anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a like. It really does help me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.